Hello, everyone. I am beyond excited for today's interview. Hello, Sharon. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, hi, both
Hi
to you
guys.
and everyone that's listening to us. Hello to you.
Oh, we've been laughing and talking right before we turned on the recording how there's so much to talk about. I'm beyond excited. And I figured without a delay, let's dive into all the secrets that you've discovered by regressing people.
Oh my gosh, it's so fun for me because I love finding out all this information. I mean, I'm learning right along with my clients and right along with anybody that reads my books because I don't write my books. I'm just like the scribe, the transcriber. So I'm learning all this information like everybody else. And I mean, I never thought that I would be doing anything like this in a million years. I mean, if you had told me, I would just never have believed you. It's just amazing. And it's so fun for me. But it all, started by accident because I wanted to take this class. So I'm a QHHT practitioner, and I know you had another interview with my co-partner, Suzanne Spooner, who's also an amazing QHHT practitioner. And I wanted to take the QHHT class, and it was all of a sudden going to be in Florida. And it was rarely in Florida during that time, so I had to jump on it.
Oh,
But this class was coming up so soon, so I was really put on the spot and I had to find someone to regress on the spot. And I just thought to myself to ask my friend Jen. And in fact, I blurted out, and asked her way before I could think about it. And when I did that, I felt like I made such a big mistake because Jen had been my friend for over 10 years. So I had known Jen really well. And I knew that she was not into any of this metaphysical stuff whatsoever. So here I was asking somebody I had been friends with for 10 years if they would be a hypnosis subject and do a regression. And I just thought, why did I ask her? I just, when you say something and you're just regretting it, you're like, oh my God. So I told her what I was doing and that I needed a volunteer and that basically you can find out anything in your session and you can find out who you really are and you can even heal your body if you have any issues. And so this is how I got into this whole Atlantis and everything. She looked at me and she said, I didn't really realize what you did. And here I was thinking, we've been friends for 10 years. I have tried to bring up this stuff, but anytime I would bring up anything metaphysical, if it was too spiritual, it was like, oh no, can't talk about that. So she said, I didn't really know what you did, but I've been suffering from this brain condition called pseudotumor cerebri. And basically, what it was this severe swelling and then her brain of her spinal fluid, and she was losing vision out of her left eye, and there was a huge risk of a stroke. And so because of that, she was working really closely with this team of specialists at the University of Miami, and they told her there's no cure for this, but the best that we can do is put you on heavy duty medication, and you might have about 20 years to live. Now Jen was 32 at the time,
wow.
and so she was just absolutely devastated. And she said, Sarah, I will definitely be your hypnosis volunteer because she hadn't even told anyone. So she was the teacher at my children and her children's school. And she was very scientific and she wasn't, like I said, wasn't into any of this, but she also was a very private person at the time. So she hadn't told anyone about her illness. So she was just willing to do anything, hoping that maybe she would be healed. So in her first session, I regressed her and she went back to this ancient civilization. Now, as a regressionist, you hear a lot about ancient civilizations. It wasn't, it was a huge deal to me, but she's just describing it in so much detail. I mean, it was as if she was there and she was all the smells, the birds,
Oh,
describing like this ancient civilization, how people reacted to one another, how there was so much compassion, and she could tell it was in the South Pacific. And the women were the leaders. They were the natural leaders because the women carried subconsciously this information that was passed down through the subconscious. They never had to teach their daughters, but this was really valuable information. And it was just something that was natural and instinctual. And this knowledge would be things like what plants would have certain medicinal properties, what plants you use for certain things, and which plants not to eat. And because this was such valuable information, the women were the natural leaders, and they were also more compassionate leaders in this civilization. And this civilization was compassionate. People loved each other so much. There was no competition. In fact, people really worked for one another, and it was such a beautiful society she was describing. Then she realized that there were these visitors, and these visitors were nothing like any of them had ever seen before because they showed up in these travel spheres that were super high technology. I mean, you couldn't see them from the outside, but when they would land, all of a sudden people could come out of these spheres and you could see there was a lot of technology. And then even the clothes that they wore regulated their body temperature. I mean, they were very, very advanced. And these visitors, they were humans. They wanted this immunity that that these people had on this planet. This is before we knew what we were talking about. Anyway, they couldn't get what they wanted. They wanted something that couldn't be given to them. And basically, they got so upset because they wanted this, and they were having a lot of issues with illnesses where they lived on their very advanced society because of all the technology and because things had gone so haywire. They were dealing a lot of times with different illnesses. So when they couldn't get what they wanted, and they took my hypnosis subject, but her name was Kala in that lifetime, took her as a prisoner, made her watch first as they destroyed the whole entire civilization. And the way they did this was the reason why that continent was sunk was because they were using atomic like level devices. They had that type of technology. So they set off these atomic like devices in rifts within the ocean, and it created these massive tidal waves. There were two tidal waves, and it destroyed and sunk the entire continent. Anyway, so after that lifetime where my friend Jen was recounting these, these people, and then eventually she died in a prison after spending about 60 years in this prison with this high technology where she could see what was going on. But this is from the perspective of a prisoner. So after she passed in that lifetime and that continent was destroyed, she was able to see from a different perspective different things. And during that part of the regression, I always ask to speak with the person's subconscious, higher self, whatever you want to call it, because then I can find out more about what's really going on. So I asked the higher self, why of all lifetimes did you show her this one? You could have shown her many different lifetimes. And they said, well, the point of this was because the two of you agreed before this incarnation to get together and to uncover this information, that the world needed it so badly. And you two said that you would do this. So you needed to uncover this information and share it with the world, and we will help you. So I just thought, oh, that's a nice story. I didn't really think anything of it. But then I asked her higher self, what is the very root cause of her brain condition? And they said the root cause was to act as the catalyst to get her to have a session with me. That because she didn't believe in any of this stuff, she would have never had a session with me. And that's so true. So I said, well, okay, well, now that we got that message, can you release and heal the brain condition? And they said, yes. Now, all of a sudden in the session, Jen starts to feel it draining, like it starts draining. And after I woke her up, she was like, oh my gosh, I'm starting to see out of my left eye. Something's happening. I can't even believe this. So she had to wait a couple weeks to go back to her team of specialists, and they do all the scans, and they think they're going to have to do some other procedure because before she came in to have the session, it was getting really bad. And they do the scans and they're like, I don't understand this. It's healed. There's nothing there. And she was like, well, guess what? I had this hypnosis session. I did past life regression. And they're like, there must have been something we did though. Like maybe it was like something, I don't know. Maybe it was like, and she's like, well, I didn't take any of your medication. I stopped taking it. Or like, we did something, right? Anyway. But it was amazing. So the two of us thought, well, since she had such an amazing reaction, maybe there is something to what our higher self said about us uncovering this information. So we started from the very beginning. I put her under hypnosis and I told the higher self, okay, take us to the very beginning of this story, the story you want us to uncover. And I thought she was going to go back into that lifetime and start from the beginning. I thought she was going to go back to her childhood. I just, in my mind, assumed that that's where she was going to go back. But no, the beginning of the story wasn't the beginning of her childhood. It was all of a sudden, she's remembering another lifetime as an extraterrestrial coming to Earth for the first time. Now, Jen did not believe in extraterrestrials. And I was just like, wow, she's really going to think I'm weird after this one because she already thought I was weird enough. And this is my friend who doesn't believe in extraterrestrials, recounting in so much detail so she had this bodysuit, her ship, how it was like, they used propulsion, propulsion mechanism that created this like hover like technology, and how it would suck the energy through like a fan and then they would propel their ship. And then she's describing how like her planet was running out of resources. And oh my gosh, mind blowing. As a regressionist, I've heard some of this stuff, but to get it with so much detail from someone with no background in this was mind blowing. So, that was the beginning of the story. They wanted us to understand how this all came about. And we came to understand that there were a lot of extraterrestrials that were seeding the population. So they started from the beginning with us, and neither one of us were experts whatsoever in these places that we came to understand were called Atlantis and Lemuria. Now, this is where the whole story gets even crazier, okay? So I was working with Jen because I wanted to uncover this information that they said was so important. What I thought was a coincidence, and as I guess you guys probably know, and everybody knows by now, there are no coincidences, but all my clients, almost all, not all of them, but most of them were showing up, and deep under hypnosis, they were recounting the same lifetimes. Like they would like, I was just like, wow, does everyone go back to a lifetime in Atlantis or Lemuria or an extraterrestrial crash landing? Like, what is happening right now? So I thought that maybe this was like a trend. So I asked around my other coworkers that do this as well. I think I asked Suzanne, and I was asking people, are you guys getting a lot of Atlantean lives or Lemurian lives or extraterrestrials crash landing? And no, it was just me. So and the higher self kept saying, you need to put this down into a book, that you put it down. You're not writing it. We're writing it, document it, and then we will share it for you. And I was like, I guess it's about time I start, I listen and I do that, so I started documenting all these other sessions that were also happening around the same time. And that's how I wrote A Hypnotist Journey to Atlantis. And my friend Jen wrote a book too, and it's called Child of the Universe, and it's her own firsthand perspective. So there's two, so they're kind of like they go very well together, because one's her firsthand perspective and one is a compilation of other sessions along with hers. But it was so amazing because the higher consciousness kept saying people have incarnated and are waiting for this information to come out, because after the destructions of these two civilizations, there was so much karma and so much trauma to be accounted for. And the secrets of these places has been buried for so many thousands of years. But most of the people you see today have had a lifetime during those times, and that they are still carrying around so much trauma. And all they really have to do is to be triggered in some way, or to read something or hear it. And parts of them can actually be freed and released just from that small action of doing that. So they basically wrote the book for these people. So, I'm just the messenger. But as soon as I did publish it, and I self-publish my books, as soon as I published it, it just got shared everywhere. And I was like, how do these people even find out about me? So even like Regina, I I've been, going on Gaia a lot. I'm so lucky. But even with Regina, she reached out to me shortly after I published the book, and I asked her, nobody knows. I asked her, how did you get my book? And she's like, I don't know. I'm going to find out. So she asked around. She said it was on my desk. I was like, does anyone know? No. So
Wow.
it's just wild. It's just amazing. But I've learned like so much about our history, about what's happening now, and it's just exciting, for me, really.
Very exciting. And I feel like I feel that you got all these experiences of people coming to you for these particular Atlantis and Lemuria, because you had that in your frequency. You had that. You wanted to know on a sub level, on a subconscious level. That was what your contract was, right?
It was. It is. And it's funny because, people will ask me, what are you going to write about next? And I don't know because I don't know what they're going to share with me, because it's not me that's writing it. It feels like this, like a telephone almost, where these higher conscious beings, or, ETs, or even other, past life personalities will kind of use the telephone and share stories that really shed so much light into our ancient past. So it's just really like fascinating to hear all that stuff, because it's so magical. I mean, even recently I had this client who was being chased by this group of men, and she found herself lost in a cornfield, and all of a sudden she felt like some weird sleep come across her, and she fell asleep, and then she woke up back on a well-lit road where she knew where she was. And so deep under hypnosis, her higher self said, yeah, we moved her car. I mean, that's really amazing. Like if your higher self, I mean, we have so much more help than people really realize. If they could move our cars and like put us to sleep and put us back on a road because it's not our time to go, you know, what else are they doing for us behind the scenes? There's so much magic that no one's been really told about, but it's really there. It's really real. It's amazing.
It truly
Yeah.
is. And I really want to second what you said about there being waves of clients, right? As if the time
Yeah.
has come for something to come true, to come through and to
Yeah.
come true. And all of a sudden, everybody who shows up in my practice, same thing, same message, same story. So I really love that you had that experience as well. Were you also working with Jen when you started looking into Egyptian history, into the pyramids, into the Sphinx, or was it somebody else?
No, it was with Jen at that point. And then Jen finally moved herself and her family to Hawaii because it was the closest place to ancient Lemuria that she could go. And her higher self said that she had never been able to do that because she had always lived close to Atlantis in order for it to trigger her memory so that she would release this story many, many times. But I worked with her when it comes to Sphinx information, which was really interesting. So after we were both done our books and we published them, then we wanted to find out more. And before we really published our second books, that's when she moved to Hawaii. So I used a compilation of different people, just like you said, through the different waves of people that just come. I don't have to seek anyone out, as I'm sure you know how it works. It's so interesting. But Jen and I were trying to find out more, and I thought that the next book would be more about Atlantis. I mean, I really have no clue what the higher consciousness is going to share through people. But they wanted us to share information about the Sphinx in Egypt. And it's so interesting because it's all connected to Atlantis too. So there's so much of our ancient history that we aren't aware of. But one of the most important things that I really gathered from learning about the Sphinx is that no one, no matter what anyone takes from underneath the Sphinx or any artifacts anyone takes from these ancient places, the really important part is still there because a lot of these places, just like the Sphinx and the temples and the pyramids, are built on top of very important energy grid lines. So just by going to these places, you can absorb this information. And you don't need to read something to absorb the information. The information is actually there for you. You just have to get it through your mind. So it's not really accessed from a book that would be under the Sphinx. It's accessed through the mind, through the light codes and the hieroglyphs. So according to my clients, about 1.5 feet off the ground in these sacred places are these light codes. And they emanate up and they even come through the hieroglyphs. And by tuning yourself, almost like a radio channel, you can read what the information that's coming through to you. You just have to allow yourself to open your mind a little bit and to allow yourself to trust what you're receiving. But anybody can tune into this stuff. So it really doesn't matter what they take, although that is really sad that they have taken things from the Sphinx and from these ancient places, but it really doesn't matter. And these temples are set up for a really interesting reason that I never really knew. But temples were set up almost like a fail safe. So just in case the civilization coming after them would lose any of the records or the histories, the temples would keep this information within the energy within the temple. So that's what the temples are basically designed for. So people can go into a temple and they act almost like portals to other dimensions where you can access this information, but it would also be through the mind. Because it's interesting how each person is becoming almost like their own radio transmitter. And the higher consciousness has always been saying, we need to develop our subtle body, our understand that there are subtle energies and frequencies, and start to learn how to read the subtle energies because we are like these energy transmitters. We are like radio towers. It's one of the reasons why when you get the goosebumps, your hairs stand up on end because they act almost like antennas because you are like an antenna. So it's you that's the missing piece. When you go there, you're the one that can pick up the information. You don't need anything external or outside of yourself. It's really, really fascinating. And it's the way it is in all of Egypt and these sacred places.
And when you say temples, do you mean temples, or do you mean the pyramids?
No, so the temples are different, and there's a lot of information stored within these temples, and they're all over the world. Temples all over the world. We're actually that's what I've been told is that they were built as a way to have this information because temples are built on specific points of energy so that they would store this information so that anybody could go in and be downloaded with the information. And temples, apparently, according to the higher consciousness, have their own consciousness. They're like alive and they call people to them. They call you when you're ready. So you don't go into these places by accident. It's not like, oh, let me take this boring trip. Like you're actually being called to these temples. It's really interesting. And the Sphinx is also like a radio tower. So the Sphinx was built on this very special rock that acts like a generator almost, and it harnesses and stores all of our history, and it broadcasts it out to other realms, other places within this earth, within the inner earth too, and other planets and realms and dimensions as well. It acts as almost like a radio transmitter, just like our bodies do and our pineal gland. But the Sphinx is really interesting because the higher consciousness has said there's like an obelisk on Mars that's broadcasting back to the Sphinx, and these other planets that are also broadcasting back to the Sphinx, and the Sphinx is broadcasting out to them as well. So it's really interesting, this interconnected system. It's just fascinating. It's stuff I would have never known had I not been doing this type of work.
Yeah. Mm.
It's really incredible. Yeah, I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. I was just wondering if you have a specific story or any information about the pyramids themselves.
Yeah. So, oh gosh, I mean, the pyramids were used for so many different purposes. So there's really not just one purpose that they had. In Atlantis, they had pyramids that were set up with a crystal, and inside the pyramids, they would have the crystal looked like, have you ever seen Vogel crystals? It's like a type of crystal in the shape of it. So the crystals would be like this, and they were clear crystals, but inside was another crystal that was shaped in the term like a Vogel tool. And this was what powered everything. So they used crystals to power things, and they used the pyramid shape to power things. And the pyramids were set up for so many reasons. One of the reasons why there were pyramids was to power everything. There's pyramids all over this earth. There's some pyramids in the ocean even. And there were also initiation chambers. There are also places where you could rejuvenate yourself. The Bent Pyramid is actually a place where you can speak with your ancient ancestors because it's built differently in a way where you can actually tune in almost like an ancient radio. The Red Pyramid is different in that you can actually change your reality in a sense. That's how they use. I mean, they won't share exactly how because they said we can't know yet, and we will be able to soon as we evolve our consciousness a little more. But some of these places are set up for these reasons. But also another thing that I found was super fascinating about pyramids is they can translate higher frequency. So they act as these like special places where other beings from other realms can focus in different information and different high energy and frequency, and then the priest would go in and be able to translate into this realm the high frequency. I mean, there's so many different things that the pyramids were used for, but I found those like some of the most fascinating anyway. And one more thing about pyramids, as you can tell, I love all this stuff. The Great Pyramid was really interesting because a lot of the initiate priests would go inside that sarcophagus or whatever, even though it was in a different location. As my clients under hypnosis remember, it was just a little bit different because it was located on one of those energy vortex lines. But they would go into the sarcophagus, they would do this meditation that would bring them into this really high state of frequency because they understood how to put themselves in that type of state. And then through that, it would reverberate against that coffin box. So the material is like that on purpose because it amplifies almost like a crystal that state. So when you amplify that type of high vibration, that what they would do was they would pop themselves out of their body, go into another realm where they could speak with these high beings, gather the sacred information and bring it back. And that was the sacred secret information that was only allowed in the certain, initiate priesthood. But there's so many things that we can still do in these pyramids. And that's why Suzanne Spooner and I are taking people on Egypt trips, because we make our Egypt trips different in that it's all about the person coming, because as everyone's DNA is being activated now, it's one thing to go to these places and just see them, but it's another thing to actually do meditations in these places. So Suzanne and I lead meditations so each person can find out how they react to these places, because we feel like that's the most important. You can hear all day long the different information, but it's what do you subconsciously know about these places that is really fascinating.
I'm so interested about what you just shared about being in the sarcophagus and that allowing them to use that as a tool. Have you been in the sarcophagus yourself?
Yes,
What was
I
that like for
did. Oh
you?
my God. Oh my gosh, it was so fascinating because you could feel the change of energy. I'm not psychic or a medium or I'm not an energy worker or anything like that. But it was, I don't think there's anyone that could not feel the change in the frequency and the energy just when you go into the Great Pyramid. I mean, to me, this is how it feels. You know, when you go into nature and you've been in nature for a little bit and you just feel happier, like rejuvenated. Well, it felt like that, but amplified. Like I could feel that I was, how do you say, like charged? Like I was being charged up. Like it was a definite feeling that I don't think anyone could not feel. And you know what I noticed too is that there was a certain vibration that was going throughout my body. Like I could feel this feeling, like something was being activated within me. I don't know how else to describe it, but it was really magical. Honestly, to me, going to Egypt, that was my favorite part because I was so, I mean, I love it when I can actually experience these things that my clients talk about, because I don't like I'm not psychic or anything like that. So I really felt that and I was like, wow, okay, this is really, really real to me. So that was amazing.
So
Incredible.
when you're going through the HQQT, H,
QHHT, yeah.
yeah, QHHT. I knew
Don't
there was
worry, no one
something
gets it
double,
right.
yeah. Um, did you, were you put, you must have been put under as
Yes,
well.
yes.
And did you come up with anything from that you don't mind sharing, that you,
I don't mind sharing. Uh one of the most fascinating regressions that I've had was that I lived in Atlantis, which makes a lot of sense because I live in the Florida Keys. I live really close to where I lived in that lifetime. And I was a judge in that lifetime. So my job was actually to decide who could stay in Atlanta, in the capital at that time, or who would go. Such a horrible thing to say. But I took my job really seriously and I was very studious and I really felt like I was a fair judge. But the best part about that life, honestly, well, one of the best was my sandals. Okay. These were like, I was an old man. And when I remember this life, these sandals were like, okay, have you ever ridden an electric bike where it pushes you? The sandals could push me. I could walk around the inner ring, and it took me about like 3.5 hours to walk around the inner ring of Atlantis. But the sandals would push you like an electric bike. Someone please develop them because, and what they would do is they would mold with my feet. So they would kind of gently push on all these different points within my foot. And even though I was an old person, like I think I must have been in my 70s about, equivalent to that. I could walk for whatever because they were like electric bike sandals. So I'm hoping someone
wow.
develops that. But anyway, um, during the time, this particular time in Atlantis, there were a lot of experiments with human DNA and animal DNA, and it was really wreaking havoc during that time. And so there was a lot of violence because there was a lot of issues with the people that were affected that looked a little bit animalistic, and they were being born with animal type DNA. And what was the whole lesson really that came with that was these people that, even though they were so disregarded by society, they had such major abilities because of their side effects, because of their animal DNA side effects. And, it's interesting because you can see that showing up as another lesson in today's society where, even the savants they might be considered to have a disability, but there's obviously a channel that's open in their mind where they have a major ability and they can recall things that other people can't. And the higher consciousness, as said, same with ADHD, where these people have this huge ability to think greater than other people. So, whenever I hear about someone that has a disability, I instantly know that the higher consciousness would say that's a huge ability, just like dyslexia or I was really fascinated with stigmatism because apparently the eye shape is different for a reason, because people could see people with astigmatism and are actually supposed to be, if they could train themselves, they can see into other realms and dimensions, and this comes very easily to them because of the shape of their eye. So these disabilities are huge abilities, and it was the same in Atlantis. And nobody learned the lesson then, but all these lessons are coming back now. And it seems like, according to the higher self, we're learning so much better this time around, and we're making so much progress. And part of that is because of all the information that's available to us.
Yeah, it's good to hear. It's making me hopeful, that we are going in the right way in a faster pace.
Well, no, I'm sure Suzanne probably told you, but anybody that does this work, the information that comes through all the time, of course, it's from a higher perspective. They say we're right on track and that we're headed into pretty much a golden age. But just like any lesson or any golden age has always come after chaos. I mean, it's just how the cycles work. So it's chaos, golden age, chaos, golden age,
Yeah.
so it's just part of the cycle and the cycle that we're in right now. But what we're headed for is something so magical and beautiful, is what I'm told by so many people. So if I didn't do this job, I would definitely probably have a different opinion because I wouldn't know. But because I'm doing this almost every day, and I hear this straight from the higher consciousness, I'm really excited for our future because I do not hear otherwise, even from the most skeptical people who are consciously telling me that we're all going to die. Their higher consciousness tells me otherwise. And I think, well, I'd rather trust somebody who I know consciously said the opposite.
Right. That's cool. Very good.
And it's really remarkable how Jen's life was so transformed that she went from the person she was before the session with you to then moving to Hawaii and embracing her roots, if you will, right? And I wonder if there's any other stories you can share with us. I've been loving listening to your stories.
Oh, sure. I mean, Um, I can tell you a little bit about what I'm working on right now, like a
Please
little bit.
do. Yes,
So I'm
please.
working, it's going to take me months though, probably to finish book 4. But right now I'm knee deep in this 4th book. Well, I'll tell you the story of book 3 because that's safer. And then a little bit about book 4. But book 3 was I was just doing anyway, I was doing this meditation where I was trying to manifest because I had learned it from this group of extraterrestrials that came through one of my clients, and they was teaching him a
Wait, we have to
manifestation
talk
technique.
about this. You have to tell
Okay,
us about this.
all right.
Yeah.
So this client, he was supposed to, what was he supposed to do? He was supposed to create some sort of app or something like that. And his higher self said, "Oh, you're not utilizing the human design correctly. You need to use humans are designed so that they can manifest really easily through their emotions. Like humans think that they can manifest through their mind. It's not the case. They manifest through their frequency, their vibration, and their emotions. And the extraterrestrial, which was another version of himself in a higher level, was saying that he needed to understand the dynamics of a human and to use his emotions correctly. And they said emotions act as the gateway through the universe. So the best way for him to manifest was to focus on a very beautiful, positive emotion. And then through that, just visualize a portal opening and pulling forth what he wanted and what he desired. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna do that. So then well, maybe like a week later, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do that. So I mean, one way for me that I think is super easy if you want to get into a very high vibration is to just focus on gratitude or something you're really grateful for, and maybe go out in nature and do it. It's just easy to do it that way instead of being inside. So I was like, oh, I'm so grateful, blah blah blah. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to open up the portal and then let me pull forth like, some new information. I really want a new subject, somebody come share some interesting information. So I was doing that and then my phone pinged, right? I really didn't put two and two together. I was just like, wow, how did my phone ping right now? Because my phone's always on silent during the day, because I was going to have a session later. So I was like, that's weird. My phone pinged. And then I noticed it was like a message on Messenger. And I was like, you normally can't put a message through Messenger because normally you have to be friends with somebody to have a message come through. But it was this woman, and she said, I had this weird, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I had to reach out to you right now. And I don't know why. So I'm just reaching out to you right now. And I thought, oh my God, like that's so weird. So I thought, I don't think that's crazy at all. Anyway, our first session, so I managed to rope her into getting a session with me because I thought this was a really weird coincidence. I was just asking the universe for this, and the extraterrestrials told me this is how you could manifest, and I did it. And then my phone pinged, and this woman wanted to talk to me. So I don't think this is a coincidence. So as soon as she went under hypnosis, and she went deep really fast. I mean, it was her first time, and she was this Caucasian 30-year-old. Just to give you a little bit of a background. So she's goes under really fast, and all of a sudden this other voice comes through, and he said, "My name is Anawaya, and I'm the one that actually contacted you because I'm ready to tell our story now." And so I started listening to this person named Anawaya, and it turns out he was this Cherokee who was actually walking. This is his firsthand perspective, walking the Trail of Tears. Now, I he was saying that he's not dead. He's like more like a parallel lifetime to her, that he feels very much alive, but he can focus his consciousness in a way where he was doing a meditation, and he could focus in almost like a telephone call through my client, who's also another version of him in the future, and can share this information. But he was saying this information is so important. People really need to understand the indigenous tribes. And I started learning so much about this stuff I had no idea before, and how it ties into these ancient civilizations. It always comes back to these ancient civilizations, which is so amazing. So it took me a while. And like I said, I don't write these books. And that book, Anna Wyatt's book, wrote itself in less than a year. And he claims, like I said, he was Cherokee, Native American. But of course, he just said he was Cherokee, that he didn't, say,
Yeah.
I am a, like that. And he would use different terms and stuff like that. But like he didn't call them Atlantis, he called it the land before. The land before. And he understood my clients, but he could use her vocabulary. So he's like, what you would call Atlantis, we call it the land before. Anyway, it was interesting because I started to understand that a lot of the ancient symbols came from these places. So when I was working with Jen, when she was deep under hypnosis, I had her open her eyes and draw the symbol for Lemuria, where that beautiful civilization. And she drew the four corners symbol, and I thought, that's so strange, that's the symbol for Lemuria. So then I come to find out that a lot of the Lemurians went to North America, and so they were holding the sacred information from Lemuria, and that's why they had the same symbol, and it's all connected. It's just so mind blowing. So yeah, there's, I mean, just countless stories like that.
This
Yeah.
is really amazing. I love it all. And I would love for you to tell us a little bit about the fourth book. What is the
Okay.
subject? Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you. It's really wild. And it sounds so crazy, but it's real. So anyway, um this woman, and her name is Christy, just like in Jen's past life, she was remembering this woman named Christy. So this woman named Christy is an actual person, and she's young. She works for a corporation in the corporate world. So also like Jen, not wasn't into any metaphysical stuff whatsoever. Actually, just like to watch health and wellness videos and stuff like that. Just not in, but health and wellness is in diet,
Yeah.
and exercise. Um, so all of a sudden, something popped up on her screen one time, and it was an interview with me. where I'm talking about Atlantis. And she thought she recognized me and that she knew me from her corporation. And so she was like, are we doing a show on Atlantis? Like, because she's in charge of this. So she got really concerned. So she watched it and was wondering why someone who worked with her, me, was on the show. So she was like, what are they talking about? So she listened to it and then she had the chills because I started talking about my client named Jen, who was remembering this woman named Christy
Wow.
and this brain condition. Now, Christy, the current client, has the same brain condition as Jen. And so she downloads this video that I was doing, this interview, and she watches it. And then she has the chills even more because I'm describing the same things that were in her dreams. So she goes to contact me, but I didn't have any sessions available because I was booked, but I had a workshop coming up. And she thought to herself, well, maybe I'll do that workshop, but I think I'd rather have a one-on-one session. So I don't know. I'm going to think about it. So she goes to garden. She's digging around, pulling out weeds in her garden. So she gets her little shovel. I don't know what she was doing, but in her garden, she scoops up money and she's like, what? There's money in my garden. And it's the same exact amount as what I charge for my workshops. So she's like, gosh, so I have this money. Like, maybe I should take this workshop. So she books the workshop. And then all of a sudden, like a couple days before the workshop, she's like, wasn't feeling well because of the same brain condition that Jen was having. So she emailed me and she said, is there any way I could just get a session with you the day before the workshop? Because I'm not really feeling that well. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry because I have a client that day. I'm fully booked. I can't, I'm sorry. And so I got off the phone and I checked and I had an email and it was from my client canceling, of course. So I was like, actually, right after I got off the phone with you, my client canceled. So yes, I can fit you in. And then so she comes and has a session, and all of a sudden, this woman named Alice comes through in her session, and she's remembering this time period in the 1300s. And Alice is telling me, yes, I got married really young, and it was an arranged marriage, and I'm part of this noble family, and all this stuff. And after we hear her lifetime and she was stabbed and everything like that, I asked to speak with Christy's subconscious. And they start sharing with me stuff about that only I knew about what I was working with Jen on before Jen left for Hawaii. And they said that she had come to fill in the missing spots because I hadn't finished uncovering all the important information. And so Christy had come
Wow.
sharing this information. Anyway, so we decided to work together again. So we started uncovering more about this person, Alice, who calls herself Alice, her lifetime. She comes out as soon as Christy's under hypnosis. So Alice lives in the 1300s. And she's part of this noble family. Her father-in-law is King Edward the First. So I thought, well, I must be able to look up Alice, let me Google this, So I'm looking through historical records. And Alice is telling me, yeah, my mom is Welsh, and she carries forth all this magical information about this place, Avalon, because there's something within our bloodline where we can understand, how to utilize nature. And the higher consciousness said, this information is so important because all this information needs to be available for people, because as we move into this time, people are going to need to understand how to use the ancient ways. The ancient ways need to come back. So Alice was saying she stored all this information. She couldn't share it because she would be killed. So she was sharing it through me. It was like a phone call. So I'm like, God, is there a record of someone named Alice? So I Google it. I've been talking to Alice DeLacy. She's an actual person. She was the Countess of Lincoln in the 1300s. And I looked it up, and every single thing Alice has been telling me has been exactly correct, although they got her history a little wrong. Alice was murdered, and they don't have that in there. Also, Alice had a daughter. They don't have that in there. And I think the reason why the history hasn't recorded this is because her daughter kept that sacred information. So the higher consciousness keeps saying, you know, you need to uncover all this information, because as humanity is evolving to the point where we will go back to the ancient ways, we have a choice, and we need to know what our choices are. So anyway, that's what I've been working on. I think it'll take me um maybe like 5 more months or something to finish book 4. But yeah, it's really fascinating.
Fascinating, mind-blowing, really, when you think
I
of that.
know.
Wow.
It's really
Mm.
exciting. Thank you for sharing with us. I cannot wait for the
Yes,
book to come out. You have to let me know about it.
Oh, I
yes,
will. I will.
let us
Yes.
Yeah.
know. Yes,
Yes,
please.
it's
Wow.
really incredible. How has all of this changed you, right? You as a person, because even though you are a scribe, you're also a person, right? You're also taking it in, applying it like the manifestation.
You know, it's interesting because in I know because I know that I've been murdered in so many lifetimes, as haven't we all, you know, and the murderer, you know, in so many lifetimes. But being the one to share this information hasn't always been easy. And for me, it's almost like a joy in the fact that I feel like I've tried to do this so many times before. And the higher consciousness has said I've written this book, this information so many times before. But there's a joy in being able to do it, you know, where it's more freeing. But I mean, even like this morning. So, you know, you see the background because I was filming, you know, this morning and sharing information. Um, you know, I had this dream last night where I was being murdered for sharing some of the information. And I woke up this morning and I wonder if I still have it. I had like a ring around my neck. Like it looks like I was strangled.
Wow.
So I can feel like the past life, my past, like healing myself, you know, like healing it. Like I can share the information and no one's going to shoot the scribe at this life, you know, like I'm going to be okay being the scribe and the messenger this time around. Um,
Oh,
but I started to understand more about how much help we really have doing this work, and seeing the help that my clients are given, and just how magical it is when we tune in to ourselves, you know, and really find out who we really are, because people have this this information stored within their DNA. And as their DNA is being activated, I mean, people are being activated and their powers are coming online. So, you know, it's a magical time really to be alive. Of course, like, you know, I have kids and a husband and, you know, don't always have best days every day. But, you know, I'm glad that I do this work because I really feel like it helps me so much in those tough times.
yeah, that's wonderful that you do this work. So tell us, if someone wants to make an appointment with you, they have to come to Florida. Is that correct?
Yes, but right now I'm booked up, so I am doing these workshops. And
Okay.
um, you know, the last workshop was really magical because I feel like there's a lot of healing that happens in groups. You know, even like your viewers that are all watching this together, there's something magical that happens as you feel like a sense of community and you're all learning something together. So
Right.
it's kind of very powerful. I mean, people think like just one-on-one is always better, but I've noticed that a lot of healing can come in group settings. So I have a lot of workshops to offer. I don't have any sessions available because I'm fully booked at the moment. But
That's
you can go to my website. It's
yes.
theholistichehypnotist.com. Just theholistichehypnotist.com.
Yeah, thank you for
Um,
saying your website so people can come and join you. I wanted to share a story in a workshop I've done. So I'm thinking of a particular workshop, but this has happened with others. 3 people who never have met each other before that point experienced the same lifetime from 3 different points of view, but were able to place one another in that life. I'm totally with you. A lot of healing happens in a group session. So yes, yes,
Oh my gosh. And don't you just love that? It's like people think
incredible.
they're coming just
Yeah.
by accident to these,
right.
you know, workshops or these groups, and they're not. Just like I'm sure there's a connection between everybody that watches your channel, you know,
Yeah.
and it would
Yeah.
be interesting if they found out the connection they have to each other.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
right. When we start thinking in those expansive ways, it's really mind-bending and mind-blowing. Yes.
Wow.
I cannot thank you
Absolutely.
enough for being with us today. I am excited for us to talk some other time, because I know you'll come with even more stories.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you guys so
Sarah.
much. It was a
Been
pleasure. Thank
enlightening.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.